So, you want to be a psychic medium. That's wonderful. You'll likely fail though, and that's a quite bit less wonderful. In fact, among its the least pleasant eventualities. I'm yet aware of what can befall a person, and by fail, I'm not referring to the financial collapse of an outed fraud, one of those county fair hacks who sense the presence of your loved ones through a crystal ball in exchange for $200. No, I'm instead referring to what happens if you stumble during the descent, or strike a bad deal with a demonic being, or getting played fool while gallivanting through the depths of the consequences that quite eternal. So do keep in mind, but we'll get into all that in a bit. For now, just be sure, exceedingly, overwhelmingly, unflinchingly, immaculately sure that you appreciate the gravity of this decision, as well as the fact that channeling the dead requires a descent into hell. And that is indeed the path you'd like to walk. If that's the case, then I believe this guide could be of some manner of assistance. So without further ado, let's begin on how to summon the dead in 3 simple-ish steps. 1. Be sure you can truly communicate with the dead. This one sounds obvious, but you would be absolutely amazed to learn how many former so-called mediums mistook their own schizophrenia or drug-induced delusions, or even a single experience with a $12 Ouija board from Target as evidence of a genuine spiritual connection to the afterlife. From there, the story is nearly always the same. They jump the gun and start charging fees, and after maybe 1 or 2 reasonably pleasant experiences, word will get out in hell that there's an idiot on the loose. That idiot will get attacked by a big bad guy from the abyss, and either get scared off into Christianity if they're lucky, or will be cursed or killed if they're not, and you don't want to make that mistake. So let me be abundantly clear. An actual spiritual current to the afterlife is exceedingly rare. Not only that, but any attempt to, on your part, to delve into the depths of the deep, or elsewhere, or the abyss, or when you not have the necessary spiritual hardware, is to do so is tremendously unwise. If you think you might have a true current, don't just assume you're a wizard. Contact an expert, just as myself, Dr. Davis, on Wingham Boulevard, where I run some diagnosis where you're small feet. Some symptoms of a true current include, but are not limited to, predisposition, paranormal activity, and in its sense of deadly happenings and tragedies occurred. We'll get into that a bit. And the occasional communication from hell or somewhere else. This typically manifests as a random and is unrecognizable through that is imprinted upon you and completed from, as opposed to human thoughts, which, like spoken words, take time to conclude. You can often trace the source of a message by judging the content. If thought is something like, you should give that homeless man your lunch, probably God. So confirm it, ask the voice if it acknowledges that Christ in the flesh, and if it says yes, then go ahead and give that homeless man your lunch. It'll be worth it. But it doesn't necessarily mean you've got what it takes to be a medium, because God can communicate with whomever he likes, so don't get cocky. He hates it. However, if the thought is something like, rob a bank, and it hits you all at once when a vault heist was absolutely the last thing on your mind, it's likely a demon. Don't rob a bank, obviously, but take your ability to intercept that message, usually a shout from hell that will normally fall on the deaf ears of the veiled living, also known as normies, as a sign that you might have some kind of deeper connection to the spiritual realms. Then come pay me a visit, and I'll confirm or deny your institution. The operative word there is pay. I do not accept cash and checks and all major credit cards, except for American Express. Only after you confirmed your connection should you attempt to travel to the realms. I cannot emphasize that enough. 2. Know how to identify conducts. I mean, like, in passing above, an experienced medium is likely fine-tuned in their innate ability to walk to remember alleyway or into a field, and if the known convection something terrible has happened here. Of this, of course, signifies the presence of conduit, a doorway in the spiritual side, sometimes deliberately placed on an experienced medium or cult member or other spiritual wanderer, and sometimes through a hole ripped in the veil by a brute force of concentrated negative energy. Now, an experienced medium like myself could walk into a conduit and tell you something just on second thought. Suicide! Just by nature of the gray tinted spiritual scent on the place. Or murder! Because it smells like red and black. Or battle, because the sheer amount of accumulated suffering is unmistakable. And also because there will likely be a historical plaque and some other tourists nearby. If you're new to all this, however, you probably won't be able to snap your fingers and call that terrible thing for exactly what it was. I just feel like something is off there. Like the air is out of place, or you're being watched. That's because it is. And you are. But after a few conduits, you'll begin to get the hang of it. And you'll be able to get the difference between a good conduit, a proper stable gateway through which you can work with, and a bad conduit. Anything else between a two-way door established by some Satan-worshipping cult through which demons entering a collapsible conduit, which is usually a trap set by the mischievous demons designed to lure native spirits into wanderers into the depths of the... And they have the door step behind them. From there, you will begin to dial up the skill even more, eventually reaching the door to a point where you can pinpoint exactly what kind of tragedy, if any, is responsible for the existence of any given door. There's an even higher rumor level of skill here, in which case you could see into the spiritual realm through the conduit without having to pass through it, although I've yet to encounter any credible accounts of its implementation. Also keep in mind that if the enemy is enraged, then you are, so be careful. Now, if you're going to be a medium in the traditional sense, developing into the afterlife on behalf of a grieving, deep-pocketed widow, then unfortunately you'll be spending a good chunk of your professional time around the worst conduits, like suicides, but more often than that, the dead will have to become dead through more natural means, like old age or cancer. No less tragic for your paying customer, of course, but less spirituality, chaotic, more some of the alternatives. In those cases, you might not have completed conduit to work with, since there's not enough pain and agony existed at the time of death to completely force open a door. Instead, you might have a depression. No, not the blue and black scented depression that likes to linger around suicide conduits, but a depression that an area that's a veil thinner than normal, but is not yet a gaping hole. If you run into one of these, then you'll have to finish opening the conduit yourself. Eventually, you'll be able to open them anywhere, but these are good training purposes. This requires somewhat time-consuming ritual that involves salt and herbs and Latin chants and all of that, but I'm not going to dive into that too much detail here because I don't want any new wanderers giving it a shot without supervision. Again, come see me for more personalized training. I also accept PayPal. 3. Know the layers of hell. Hell is essentially a commonly used term for anywhere in the afterlife that's not heaven. And that's where you'll be doing all of your work. Communication to heaven is called prayer, because typically God won't tolerate any of the nonsense in his backyard. The image your mind has conjured up of all that fire and sulfur and gashing teeth and eternal damnation is descriptive of the lake of fire, which technically falls under this category. It's a fairly broad definition, to be fair, but it's kind of its own thing, so don't worry. Nobody gets that far down until after the judgment, or unless they royally screwed up a trip into the rest of hell, and would that take some doing. Also clear up, but equally relevant, misconception. No, Dante's Inferno does not adequately describe hell. It's literally classic, but a textbook, it is not. There are not 9 layers of hell, there are 4, which, to be fair, do become increasingly horrible with each descent, the bottom of the most which is the lake of fire. The first layer is one where murder victims often reside, seeing as how they are not here because of their own behavior, alongside the billions who live reasonably decent lives and died of reasonably natural causes. It's called elsewhere. If you're thinking that doesn't sound so bad, well, it depends on what you're comparing it to. If you're comparing it to Earth, then elsewhere is the closest thing I know to purgatory. Might as well be the lake of fire. But if you're comparing it to the lake of fire, elsewhere might as well be heaven. The defining characteristics of Elsewhere is the emptiness. There are no hideous monsters here, although some demons pass through to get to the mortal realm, and no volcanoes, no lava, burning sulfur, torture chambers. In Elsewhere is just an unfinished dimensional space. Colorless, scentless, featureless. You monitor the emptiness of Elsewhere until the judgment, and believe me, the wait is a whole lot longer down there than it is up here. The good news, in case you haven't already realized, is that the majority of your trips will go this far but no further. Most people weren't killed as self-inflicted shotgun blasts to the head. After all, they were killed by cheeseburgers, and so they spent too much time in Elsewhere. So if Billy Joe and Susie went to conjure up Granny Smith, and assuming Granny Smith was in a guard at Auschwitz, you'd probably find her wandering around the emptiness of Elsewhere, sometimes near a spiritual end of her conduit, confused and alone, to be all happy to see a visitor from the mortal realm. And yes, the proximity to the conduit is why advisable to begin seance to near the physical location of their death, lest you be forced to spend a good chunk of eternity trying to track them down in the emptiness. Once you locate Granny Smith, you approach her slowly without making any sudden movements and introduce yourself. Then you'll likely get,
"Oh, Billy and Susie sent you? How are they? Are they eating their vegetables? Susie's not still dating that nasty boy from the heavy metal garage band, is she? Oh, and let me tell you something about this one time when Billy's 5, or maybe 6, or 7. No, he couldn't have been, because that was before he got into his, Batman phase, and yada yada yada. Stop them here, explain that although time has nearly no meaning in Elsewhere, it still does have time for you, and you can still live there, so time to you is valuable. So if you wouldn't mind, let's get you up to the surface so we can talk to you about each other. In some cases, though, training is required to keep them calm. This is especially the case for a recently dead who are only just now coming to grips with the horror of their fate, who might treat you like a drowning person treats a lifeguard. For people who did indeed drown to death, their panic will just turn to afterlife madness. They'll succumb to that pain and jump on you, scratch you, try to pull you down, pull themselves up. For some this reason, it is also a good idea to never accept contracts to channel the recently deceased to begin with. Give them some time to process their situation. For the love of God, do not try to be so cruel as to eventually inadvertently give them the false hope of coming permanently back to life, seeing face of that as they realize this long prayed and pleaded for a trip back up to the mortal realm was incomplete and temporary, soul-crushing. Anyway, I myself have a pre-prepared statement for the dead that bores them out of any desire to react to my presence with recklessness, violence. It also serves as an outline of a number of legal considerations, so it's probably your best interest to draft something similar once you start your own practice. To whom it may concern, congratulations! Your loved ones have purchased my psychic channeling services and would like to summon you for a temporary period to speak with them in the mortal realm. You'll be permitted to use my vocal cords and facial expressions to communicate further during the durations of the seance. Be advised that the conversation will last no longer than, on Earth, 1 hour. During this time, you may not attempt to possess my body in any other way to try to have your consequence transferred to any other person in the mortal realm. Any attempt to violate these rules could be identified as an attempted violation by a reasonable observer, including but not limited to attempt to retain control of my body beyond what is permitted, or the time allotted will result in immediate termination of proceedings, which point will be returned to Elsewhere, and blacklisted by the Association of Psychic Mediums and Interdimensional Communications from third further contact. With the living, please proceed through the outlined conduit here in a calm and orderly fashion. This brings up another point too. You want to go with them and be prepared to fight for control of your body if things do go south. There's a number of self-deliverance methods we can discuss once you're in my office, and things may very well go south unless you've developed a reputation as a wanderer not to be trifled with, which of course takes some time. Hell, I once made a fresh out of basic medium Elsewhere who claimed he'd been locked out of his own body during a seance and trapped in the emptiness. That guy's name? Ted Bundy. By the time I assisted the real Ted back into his body, he woke up in the electric chair and was sent straight back down to the third layer of hell. Poor bastard. Ted was a good guy. Okay, that didn't really happen. although it's a fun cautionary tale in the business that's regularly used to haze the new guys. I have, however, seen careless mediums get tricked into being possessed, which meant, of course, they had to get exorcised, and that's still fun for anyone, even if the spirit likes being evicted. It's just, despite Uncle Joe and not Belthamish, Demus King of Locust. One last thing, when you channel, you need to be spiritually clean and be consistently scrubbing unwanted stuff out of your system. The dead are going to be sitting in your body for an hour, and all depending on who it is, they could leave some behind all manner of nasty garbage. Some of them are smart and use the seance as an opportunity to unload some bitterness or lust or unforgiveness on you, so they won't suffer it back and elsewhere, where there's no carnal use for practically due to those things, and where you see them for what they are, spiritual anchors around your neck. When I first got started, I remember being an uncharacteristically angry and uptight and wanting to smoke. That wasn't like me. So after inhaling a pack of cigarettes, I put two and two together and traced it all back to Benjamin Gardner, an angry son of the bitch whose kid had summoned him and through me a few days prior. It all became easier to scrape off once you identify the source, but still, you want to stay on your toes. The second layer of hell is called the Deep. This realm is reserved primarily for people worse than trapped in elsewhere, but better than those trapped in the lair like Ted Bundy. Typically, you'll find liars, adulterers, and scammers and racists, and generally more unpleasant than the average person down here. But because the line between decent and not so decent people is very poorly defined in life, the second veil allegedly set between the Deep and elsewhere is so thin that some people argue it doesn't exist, implying that the Deep isn't appreciable more than a darker corner of an upper plane. Kind of like how Europe and Asia aren't really two different landmasses. For that reason, it's easy enough to wander right into it, and not until you're well within its boundaries that you realize, hey, it's darker and hotter here. For spirituality attuned toward anyone who's seen a horror movie, for that matter, dark and dawn is almost never a good combination. So turn around, walk the other way as soon as possible. Luckily for you, it's easy to leave the Deep as it is to enter, assuming you're a wanderer and not a deceased. To be honest, there isn't much said about the Deep, other than when a client describes the appropriately but not overwhelmingly shitty loved one who I'll bring back from the dead, and I know I'll be visiting the Deep. I charge extra. The negative attributes of people here are amplified immensely. They're not murderers, but that doesn't mean you want to be hanging around them for any longer than absolutely necessary. Moving right along. Of all the readily accessible layers of hell, the third is known only as the Abyss, and is by several orders of magnitude the worst. Like the Deep, it's hot and dark. Like elsewhere, it's infinite and desolate, but those things don't even come close to describing the true horror of this place. This layer, of course, is reserved for your Ted Bundys and Genghis Khans and your Adolf Hitlers, and yes, you can go meet those guys if you want. They're down there, but by the time you see what's happening to them, you almost pity them for their plight, which is saying something indeed, for those who fancy ourselves having a thread of human decency. Now, there's one commonly held idea of hell that isn't documented in any scripture, but prevalent enough in culture that is worth considering the image of demons who are running in hell and torturing people in it. Well, this is that place right here, in the lake of fire. They'll be tortured along with us, and the upper, more mortal planes, they'll only dip their feet in the waters for fun, but in the abyss, that's where they live, that's where they play. To answer your interesting questions, no, I do not take any contracts that involve a trip into the abyss, nor should you. So come to my office to ask me to channel your murder rapist Mafficio with a great ankle. Sorry, pal. Keep it moving. I'm not about to get down there and try to argue with Abaddon and the Leviathan about borrowing White Power Steve for a bit. I promise I'll bring him right back. Sure, even if they let me. No doubt they'll force me to do a bargain so as a collateral or that of the loved one. White Power Steve will be so desperate to escape that he wouldn't even care about the legal contract I cited earlier. He would wreck me out of sheer panic and would possess my body and interestingly enough probably use it to go to church and feed the hungry or do anything else he could do to think to get God see how he's changed, and man he is. And before you say, well, he's really not changed, he's just got caught. No, the unspeakable horrors of the abyss would scrub even Hitler so clean he'd volunteer as a synagogue janitor out of the goodness of his heart, assuming they ever let him out. To be thoroughly honest, I've never been to the abyss of myself. Of course I haven't. I only know what I've been told, and from one time in which I was a new media and I wandered off too far into the deep and ran up against the third veil, pressed my ear up against the wall, and unsure of its nature, could hear the screams and the laughter and the grinding. Then I heard a voice whisper my name from what sounded like an inch away, and I was filled with such an existential, eternal, and incomplexable dread that I never fully shaken the experience from my dreams. I would describe the feeling as appropriate to metaphor, but how can I? I felt like I was standing at the edge of hell, watching the apocalypse unfold right before my eyes. And I was, quite literally. Like I said, I only know from the antidote there is a wander very vastly experienced than myself, whose tales I'll perhaps recant here one day soon, if you would allow it. And from rumor, what lies in the abyss, a sea of engines, is how it was described to me. An infinite plane of torturous, monstrous, catastrophic, terrible, hideous machines designed to torment and terrorize and dehumanize the rend flesh from bone and the soul from spirit. What word is there than that other than hell? Anyway, those are tales for another time. For now, I hope you've at least given some manner of second thought to this career choice. If you're still game, and we'll find out soon enough, come by to my office. I accept cashier's checks and money orders. We're just getting started.